As Election Day on 27 November approaches, people are feeling a strong sense of national pride alongside loyalty to their political parties or candidates. But these forces can sometimes clash, making unity difficult amid diverse opinions. How can we ensure that our differences strengthen democracy without dividing us? I'm JONAS MBAMBO, joined by a sign language interpreter for tonight, Peter Mpwale. Very good evening and a warm welcome to Situation Critical. To discuss this very important topic, we're joined by two very young individuals, which are Nicole Limbo, the president of the Political Science Society at UNAM, and right next to her we have Elton Chipena, who is a political science student as well, to help us, unpack this very, very important topic and timely as well. Nicole, Elton, very good evening, and thank you so much for making time to join us on Situation Critical.
Good evening, Mr. Jonas. Thank you for having us today.
Much obliged. It's always fantastic. It's always refreshing to have young voices on this platform to share their views and opinions as well. I think because, I personally believe that, the voice of the youth really does matter, especially now. The youth has been coined as the king and queen makers in the elections. But before we get into that, I'd like us to start off with personally just defining to us what patriotism means to you. How do you define patriotism, Nicole?
Patriotism, to me, I would like to use a very practical example. Just to make it more relevant, there was a time Christine Boma and Beatrice Masilingi represented us at the Olympics. You could see the national love and the national identity that existed among Namibians. We were also proud to stand up and say, I'm Namibian and I'm part of this group. That overall love that we shared during that moment, I think would be the highest level of patriotism I've ever experienced in Namibia. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, it's just your national identity and being just proud of where you come from.
Yeah. Elton?
I think I would agree with Nicole as well, because patriotism is just that sense of loyalty towards the country that you're born from or that you're living in. And I think it's very evident as we live in Namibia, because we have instances of huge patriotism, because like Nicole explained, with the sense of identity and longing that we see within Christine Bomba and all those other practical examples, we see that love and drive people have for their country, and we see that they will rep their country till the end of days to come. Mm-hmm.
Namibia, of course, is a multi-ethnic and also multi-party country. You guys are at university, which I consider a cultural melting pot, where you get to interact with people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different languages. What is the conversation like when you interact as students, gaining new knowledge, but also getting to know each other? But at the same time, education is also supposed to be a tool that crushes stereotypes. The first episode that we had of Situation Critical was defining what it is to be a Namibian. Unfortunately, in many instances, before I am Namibian, if I come from the Kabango East region, I'm first, a KRITIKAL, then I'm mixed with Nyemba, then I'm a Kabango, then after what type of Kabango I'm good. And then, only then, oh yes, I'm Namibian. What's the conversation like on the university grounds in regards to that?
This one is quite difficult because we had a class about this actually. We spoke about it both in a class, in a module called State of Africa, as well as in decolonization of the African state as a whole. I believe it's subjective in the long run. And I think as education, as students at the university, we sort of understand that. But it's difficult outside of those parameters, because then your opinion can become sort of violent and so forth. We spoke about, does being a Namibian mean I was born here? Is it my geographical area where I was born, or is it my personal experience that makes me a Namibian? So it becomes sort of complicated, and I think we sort of concluded that it's more of a subjective thing in the long run, because there isn't necessarily something that makes you Namibian.
Elton, what are your thoughts?
I think we add on to the idea that we look into identity politics essentially, and how what you identify as in the ranking order comes before. So are you Namibian to identify as your tribe or your ethnic group, or what kind of identification do you use? And we look into that, especially within our sort of course. We look into our class, which is very multi-ethnic, and we're looking at how it's very multipolar in that sense, because we're looking at different sort of viewpoints and different identities and different identity topics, because at the end of the day, it's coming as to how nuanced and how the way forward we can go. And it's very difficult, especially within this context of elections, because when we're looking at the broader population, some of them may not know some of these identity things that we're talking about, and how ethnic divisions can lead or propagate what is this certain instances of patriotism or partisanship. So it's all coming into play of how we actually look at it and how subjective it is as well.
Let's talk about partisanship. Namibia has been fortunate enough, compared to not only African countries but the world all over. Namibia is an example of peaceful elections since independence that have, even when they were challenged, even when the results were challenged, we took them to court, and the people that took the case to court would respect the decision of the courts, and we would move on. But then again, elections also has, this election period also brings out the ugly side of us as Namibians. You know, simply because you are donning the color of Party A and I'm donning the color of Party B, and we start throwing slares at each other, and they say, "No, you are ridiculous, Elton, for supporting that type of party." Talk to us about, why, particularly during independence, does this side of us, bring out its head?
I believe, Elton, would you like to start first?
I think when we look at it, I believe it's looking at that sense of nationalism, especially within Namibia, because we're looking at the sense of history that comes with certain parties and the longingness and the identification with that party. Because if it is a certain party that has sort of a history and a longevity that is very culminated within the country, then it would have some certain, feelings towards it, and people will go, representing that party, for instance. And then we're looking at certain other parties that don't necessarily have that history, but they have that emergence and that drive, that want to interest for the party and for the country, essentially. So we're looking at it in terms of that as well.
Yeah, I think in the long run, we just need to sit down and have the conversation of where do we draw the line for loyalty? Because that, in essence, is what partisanship is, and that's the biggest issue. Some people are loyal to the extent where they can't draw the line between right and wrong, and they can't accept criticism, whether it's constructive or not. So I believe that's where the issue really comes in. People don't understand that within loyalty, it is okay to sort of criticize and be wrong in a sense.
There are some people who argue that there is a rift between the younger generation and the older generation. Now, the older generation, if you come from the 60s, during the liberation struggle, majority of them would obviously be for the ruling party.
Of course.
Or if it's opposition, there are also older opposition parties. And with the emergence of new parties, young people, being led by younger people, young people are kind of like taking a liking to these newly established parties, but now are coming at odds with the generation that raised them and said, "No, how dare you not support the party that liberated this country or that has a rich history?" Talk to us about the conversation around that, maybe on campus, Elton, on how young people who might be in this situation are handling it.
I believe that I think it's nuanced in a sense, because to be able to want to have that sense of identity and to be able to have that critical, constructive criticism towards the party that you're in, and be able to just have that identity and that you're separating it's very hard, especially in a country like Namibia, because with the single party dominance that SOPA has been having for a while, we're seeing the multipolarity of the different parties like AR by Professor Joba Mupanda, or IPC, which are considered leading opposition parties. So we're identifying with these younger leaders because they have a sense of drive and interest that we currently as the youth are also wanting to have. We're looking at solving these current issues that we're looking at, the issues that are also persisting within the country as well. So we're looking at how they have sort of a more dominant emergence to wanting to solve these things, and looking at how these issues are sort of simultaneously the same as the youth, compared to then the older political parties, and they are sort of different mentalities that is very different from the young people, essentially, towards in contemporary times as well.
focus more, in my opinion at least, on ensuring that that loyalty, that partisanship, it remains there. You sort of not necessarily owe it, but I feel like a lot of the older generations feel that way because, again, of the historical context of it, the way they gained independence, the life they lived before that independence. We don't have that experience, so we don't owe the same loyalty that they do to these older parties.
Yeah, I've heard of stories of people that have, have gotten physical with one another because of political differences. I've never seen it happen in Parliament. Of course, in Parliament, they would exchange words. They would stage a walk out, but it's never come to the point like, for example, we see in other countries. I saw a very interesting video.
Is it Kenya?
Uganda.
Uganda, yes.
The guys were at blows because of whatever was said. But to the layman on the street, let's talk about civic education here. What can be done, do you think, as far as our school system is concerned, to teach us from a very early age to engage in respectful dialogue, even if we, disagree about something. It must come to a point where, like, Nicole, it's been nice debating with you, but I respect your stance, but I'm still going to maintain my stance. But thank you so much.
I'm very passionate about this aspect because I believe a lot of people are aware that this year, UNAM took the initiative to ban political activities on campus. We didn't necessarily understand what that constituted. It felt more of like the infringing on our rights because it goes against the constitutional rules. We are allowed to practice democratic freedom. We are allowed to express our political opinions and so forth. So I think one of the most important things that we need to establish as a nation is politics isn't always a negative thing. As much as it revokes some sort of negative feelings out of us, it's about teaching that sense of maturity as well as the good code of conduct when speaking on politics. That is the beginning into how we can have this sort of engaging and productive conversations in the long run. Because politics is so suppressed, especially in spaces like schools where it's diverse, you have people from different traditions and ethnicity groups, they see it better to suppress that conversation instead of actively engaging and finding a way that it can be peaceful and still productive. So I think it's more about establishing systems that then work for us in that sense, because it doesn't make sense to all around take that right away from people.
Yeah,
I agree with Nicole because in the sense of the ban of the political activities, it was an infringement of our democratic rights and principles because we do thrive on ourselves as being a free liberal country that prides itself on freedom of identity expression and freedom of expression as well. So we're looking at also how an institution like a university is a place where young people are at, and that is the one place where you can critically engage young people in politics as well, in how they view politics and things that are emerging around politics as a whole theme around itself. And especially we're looking at how we address then this indifferences and how we actually take on criticism. It's about having then constructive criticism, as we've discussed, and actually being able to take in what is directed at you and what is being said about then the work ethic that we can do to improve the overall nation's interest and obviously healing our country's issues at the same time.
Last week, we had an interesting conversation reflecting on what happened in neighboring Botswana, where we saw a party that has been in power for
over 60 years.
Over 60 years, And it came as a surprise, not only to the Botswana, but obviously also to the sub-region. And it had one guy saying, like, it had me thinking that, do we have the political maturity, not only perhaps in Namibia, but let's say also in Angola, where MPLA is also considered a liberation movement, to make such a decision, to say, look, enough is enough in this aspect, let's go for somebody else. Do you foresee that happening, in our country, for example, or somewhere else where liberation movements have been at the helm of government since independence?
I believe that it is happening because there is a emergence with the emergence of the younger parties and more emerging dominant opposition parties. There is a reflection in that maybe it is time to move away from the age of liberation to the age of healing and actually looking at what the current state of our economy is. And I think looking at how Botswana did it was such a quick and such a yet peaceful solution and yet peaceful transition of power as well, which we grant our neighboring country as well to also take it upon ourselves. And so we're also looking at how there is maybe an age where liberation parties are dying out now within SADC as well, and maybe it will be happening within Namibia with the decline of the single party rule within SWAPO, because at the end of the day, some people are advocating for the end of the two-third majority, which SWAPO has been maintaining since independence.
I'll have to semi-agree, but partially again disagree, because it becomes complicated in Namibia. When you look at the current conversation and how conflicted people are, it's sort of like with Botswana, they stood up and said, enough is enough, we're not getting what we want. But with Namibians, when I have these conversations with many Namibians, whether it's the youth, whether it's the older generation, there's this sense again of partisanship, this loyalty that we have pledged to the dominant, to the ruling party, and it becomes complicated because as much as we're not getting as much as we should be getting, we are going to stick to, and I quote, the devil we know in comparison to the one that we don't know. It's something that I've heard over and over again during the conversation. So with Namibia, it's a 50-50. I don't know at this point.
All right. You made a very good example, and there's one thing that I was thinking about as well as I was preparing for the show, that sports has the special ability to bring us all together, you know. And coming back to that very special day when we saw Mboma come second and bring a silver medal back home after more than 25 years since Frank Fredericks, we were hugging people we didn't know.
Yeah. Everyone was one.
We were like, wow, Mboma, like, what is it? What do you think is it about sports that brings us together in such a manner that politics perhaps is lacking?
I don't think it's just sports. I think it's overall, it can be anything that, you know, just drives the heart of the people back in your nation. And it can be in terms of even a musician. It can be somebody who just has that authenticness and that drive and just that pure representation for your country. So even within sports, it was very direct, and you could feel how you're going around, you're saying, my cousin just won a gold medal or a bronze medal, you know? Yeah. But it was just because you have that love and that loyalty, and you have that respect because you have fought so much, and to be able to see your country get an accomplishment through somebody who's born and bred here it's charismatic.
Yeah, and I think the biggest issue is when we bring it back home within our borders, because outside of Namibia, a Namibian is a Namibian. And you mentioned this. In Namibia, I'm first of all from the Zambezi region, and I'm a Suvia-speaking woman. And that's why when it comes to politics, it becomes way more complicated.
Absolutely.
Because I will rather align and pledge alliance with a political party that has certain interests that have to do with my identity within Namibia first. I will align with someone who perhaps speaks about my economic status first, or my ethnic interests, or, you know, things like that. If I make a part of the majority group, I will align more with a party that is made up of members of the majority group. I think that's when it becomes complicated, because in terms of sports, when we represent as Namibians, you are just a Namibian. But within politics, there's more of a complex, division, and identity also plays a big role.
What do you guys think happens during elections? Elections are not forever, and I think during the campaign period, people forget that.
Yeah.
You know, with some of the things that are being said, some of the instances that are being held, and it's like, wait a minute, elections will finish, and we still have to live in the same neighborhoods.
Exactly.
You know, we still have to go, shop in the same malls, work in the same companies or same offices. How do we look at each other after all that was just temporary at that moment in time? Elections come and go, but Namibia is here to stay, isn't it? Talk to us about, what do you think, in your opinion, happens in that moment in time? Is it a moment of maybe temporary insanity that we are caught up in this whole thing that we can say whatever, like, no, Jonas party is going to be in power forever? Talk to us about, what your thoughts around that.
I think in the long run, after elections, it's a bit easier because we all have one common goal as Namibians. We want sustainable development. We want to get somewhere. So for now, I want to say the adrenaline and just the participation and overall how exemplified emotions are during this time. Everyone has a certain ideology that they want to root for, and they have a certain political party in mind that they want to win. But in the long run, Namibians do have a sense of maturity to understand that, okay, the common goal was to make sure that we have someone competent in government, and that's all that matters. I think the action play throughout just makes for some sort of conversation and,
Yeah, I agree with Nicole. It's the atmosphere in general is just it's very heightened at the moment, and it's all elections and all anyone can think about, because we're looking at the after effects of the elections. We're looking at what more promises are we getting throughout these elections until the 27th of November. So at the long run, like Nicole said, we're looking at which person is going to drive the country's interests, who is prioritizing our interests and upholding the democratic values of the Constitution simultaneously as well.
Mm-hmm. There was a point that someone raised when I was having a conversation with them, and they raised something very interesting. Remember when Dr. Itula was running as an independent candidate, people were wearing these Namibian printed shirts, and automatically they were associated with you being an Itula supporter. But despite the fact that it had Namibian colors on it resembled the Namibian flag. Somebody said to this day there are people who will not wear it because they feel like they'll be associated with this somebody and that party. Where does this fear come from of saying, I will support Nicole, but I'll do it clandestinely and not be open about it? What is it that they fear the most in terms of just standing and say, look, this is the party I support, and I'm not ashamed of it?
I mean, if we're being honest, we're looking at, you don't want to actively dwindle your support for the party because you might have benefits that might be reaping in the future. So you're very cautious about how you do and what you're doing towards the party. So you don't try to dismantle the relationship that you have built with it, or as well, what is destroying the relationship as well. It's about maintaining that balance that certain people have with a certain party that they choose or identify with.
Exactly. And I think also we're afraid of judgment and criticism. I mean, you go out there and you stand and you wear political party A's T-shirt, and someone will start to immediately criticize you. Why that part? What have they done for you? Why do you align with them? What do they do for you? Are you some sort of beneficial from them and so forth? I think we have a space in Namibia where people don't understand that my political affiliation or the political party of my choice doesn't necessarily create who I am and my identity. It's not who I am as a person. So I think people do fear the judgment and the criticism that comes with that.
All right. Let's quickly invite our callers to also share their views and opinions on this topic of striking the balance between patriotism and partisanship. Where do you strike the balance, especially now as we approach elections? You can give us a call on 061-291-3417. That's 061-291-3417. If you missed it, it's just running down here. You can give us a call and share your thoughts. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts as well. Manifestos was one of the things that we discussed on Situation Critical a few weeks back. And it was interesting that one of the panelists said, well, some people don't even read. They don't even read the manifestos.
People don't read anymore.
Yeah. I mean, they would blindly just go, like you said, if you support party A and your family has been supporting that party for their entire life, and you just feel like, well, it's
what I have to do.
It's what I have to do. You will not entertain what party B or party C has to say in their manifesto. What's the conversation around that in terms of, you being students of political science and just sitting down and studying material to compare what party A is saying as opposed to what party B is saying?
Have you read? We have read them. I mean, we have heard as well as the controversy around the ruling party's manifesto and so forth. In terms of manifestos,
I would say I'm genuinely disappointed because I think in this stage of our independence, we should have that ability and we should have that maintenance of actually knowing what to publish in a manifesto. What are the main issues concerns at the people's hearts and at their minds, and how are we going to address these issues? We want a step-by-step process. Don't tell us that you're going to solve these issues. We already know that, you know. Tell us how you're going to do it, you know. So there is this thing of some of these parties' manifestos, they really do lack some clerical information into certain things, and some parties just obviously, well, for my personal opinion, they do miss certain issues that are at the heart of young people, you know, such as the protection of young women in this country and the protection of queer identities, you know. So we're looking at where are the main issues of that being mentioned in manifestos.
Exactly. They lack, in simple terms, they lack depth. They're so surface level, a majority of them. And like we saw, was it 3 of them that had similar manifestos, which again shows lack of creativity. You didn't take the time to do the groundwork, the ground research. I mean, you had approximately 4, almost 5 years to do all of this, to gather your information, to get the stats in order, and you didn't deem it as necessary. It just shows an overall sense of they don't care. It's a big, we don't care in the long run. We're going to give you a document. We assume you don't have the capacity to fully understand, and we'll run with it.
Social media platforms, of which I'm sure we are all a part of, has become such a central, you know, player, you know, the world all over when it comes to politics. Initially, when social media platforms were launched, we thought it was just, hey, we're just going to catch up with a friend of mine, you know, Facebook. Hey, we went to the same high school. All right, I understand we have a caller on the line. Charles, very good evening to you. Good evening, Charles. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we can hardly hear you. Maybe we can just, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm very happy. Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Yes, we can hear you now. Please go on ahead.
He's listening to himself.
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Charles, perhaps maybe you need to step away from your TV.
I'm out of the TV now.
Okay, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Yes.
Should I put the caller name on?
Go ahead now if you can hear.
Can I tell you what?
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with the sound. You keep on coming and going, but please try again.
Come again?
Charles, can go on ahead. Right, fortunately, we're struggling with Charles there, technical difficulties. But coming back now to social media, what has been your observation in terms of the language on social media during this time as we are approaching election day, during this time of campaigns? What do you make of the language that we as Namibians are using, whilst expressing our different, political opinions?
Social media allows for people to be very opinionated because you don't necessarily have a face there and no one can put a real identity to you. So in terms of the language, it's quite often very extreme. People can say whatever they want, insult whoever they want, and just go out there and give their full-blown opinion without necessarily thinking about the consequences. And one thing that I've observed among the youth is how unserious the conversation is or the language. We go out there and we make a joke of everything, and as much as we understand how powerful social media can be, we don't take that into consideration.
I agree with Nicole because the current atmosphere of social media, it's very heightened, especially now that we're already approaching elections. In that everybody is sort of having this sense of just either hateful language or very strong loyalty towards their party, and it doesn't allow for critical discourse on what actually is meaningful and what needs to be discussed.
All right, sorry, Elton, we understand we have another call on the line. Leon, a very good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. How are you, sir?
Doing fantastic, Leon. How are you?
I'm good, sir.
Fantastic. Please go on ahead.
Okay, fine. The number one thing that I want to say is that the manifestos of the political parties.
ONG.
Hello?
Yes, go on ahead. We can hear you.
ONG.
Okay, I'm saying that the manifestos of the political parties.
ONG.
Political parties, they are not hammering on the issues of their manifestos. No, when they come into, when they're doing their campaigns. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, we can hear you.
Yes, political parties, when they come and make their campaigns, they were supposed to make sure that during the campaign, they at least explain each and every point on their manifesto and then allow time for questioning. People should ask, okay, fine, if you are to create jobs, how are you going to create jobs? And then we get the answers straight away. Sorry?
Yes, Leon, okay. Is that the point you want to make?
Yes, my point is that you cannot tell people that we brought independence, people never used to buy a white bread, they were buying brown bread. No, we don't want that. We want development. We want to see changes.
All right, Leon. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, Leon there from, I think, somewhere up north, from Godiva, I now can't remember, but I think pretty much echoing some of the thoughts that were shared here in regards to what it is that, people want political parties to talk to, contemporary issues that they want addressed. We spoke about social media, but we also want to find out where this language comes from. Leaders obviously set the tone. What role do leaders have to play in terms of saying, look, this is what we stand for, politically, ideologically, but at the same time, Nicole also stands for something else. Allow her, this is a free country. Elton also stands for a certain type, certain set of beliefs, which is allowed by the Constitution. Please do not go and try and push your agenda upon them. Yes, debate. Yes, you can agree to disagree. But let's talk about leadership, the language that they speak, and how it is understood by the ones who are on the ground, and how they will, conduct themselves in terms of expressing their political beliefs.
One thing about Namibian leaders that I've observed throughout this year is that, especially during their speeches, they don't come with any sort of ideas that they want to pass on. Or let's take a look at, example, the presidential debate, both of them that occurred. Leaders don't use a language of, I, as leader of political party A, propose that we do this and that. It's always some sort of hate speech towards other political parties or bringing down other political parties. And I think it manifests in a way where the people who then align or listen to these speeches see it as sort of like a permission to sort of do the same thing. Oh, political party A doesn't do this, then I'm going to go write about it on social media and I'm going to use the same language in the same context that my leader used. Mm-hmm. So the political leaders, in essence, lack a source of maturity when speaking, first of all, to one another, when regarding one another, which then manifests among the different people who align to their parties.
Right. Elton, just hold that thought. We have Abner on the line from Windhoek. Abner, very good evening. Abner, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, brother.
Okay, great. I just want to also a bit of contribute to the topic. I come a bit late, but I just wanted to look at the social media part and looking at elections. You know, when I view young people, especially in Namibia, is that we have what I term political illiteracy. If you look at the way young people are engaging in terms of political, it honestly has nothing to do with the progress of the country. We are more on age, religious, and also these things of female and male. We are not really talking of the substantial things like what policies a certain person or a certain candidate, a certain political party have. If you go around the social media now, it's people crying, no, that one is too young, that one is too old, that one is a female, that one is a male, that one, but there is no one who is talking. Let's look at the manifesto of who, and that's also surprisingly, there are even political parties that appears on social or on media that they copied each other in terms of manifesto, which is showing you that even the political parties are not also serious in terms of taking the country to a certain level, and they do not have an idea. And I think if young people, if we just start engaging on the substantial topics, employment, creativity, education, and health, and that is where I think we will be able to take a bullet as young people. But as far as we concerned, we are just common guerrillas. We're all jumping around, but none of us is taking a topic of how and when are we going to get jobs, how and when are we going to improve our health, how and when are we going to develop our country. It's like, no, let's not go for Huhu because he's too young. Let's not go for Huhu because he's too old. Let's not go for Huhu because he's a male, because he was out of the country, because when are we going to talk of what are we going to do? In fact, even as us as young people, we have no idea of what to do, but we are just decampaigning each other on unnecessary things. I think we need to start talking about the reality of what is going on in Namibia.
All right, Abner calling us from Windhoek, they're also sharing his thoughts. In case you wanted to add something on what he was saying.
I believe Nicole summed it up perfectly, but essentially it's just the language in which all the traditional and just what is the political parties and their language that they use and the older generation, it's just in terms of how it wreaks havoc upon then what the newly established system is, just it's very hateful in terms of it doesn't acknowledge, it has no empathy, or it has no maturity and critical discourse, which then it's not getting to the root cause of situations that we want to actually achieve and to solve within the country.
Patriotism, we've seen in some countries, Western countries, where it's been taken perhaps out of context and used as a tool to divide rather than to unite. It's somehow used by politicians to pin the blame on immigrants and say, yeah, you see, Jonas, the reason why you don't have a job is, well, because of this brother that came from this country. The reason why you don't have a university position, even if I couldn't qualify for university, is because of this sister that came from that country. So they use it to start, creating this anger in the people who are supposedly the owners of the country. But what should we look out for? And the lessons that we can draw from other countries where we are seeing this whole thing being taken out of context of, patriotism and nationalism means that the country is only for us and everybody else isn't welcome.
I believe that it's very important to be able to distinguish between when people use such rhetoric, to want to get fuel division within a country, because especially in a country like Namibia, we're very multipolar in terms of our ethnicity and also just our youth in general. So we have to be able to have that critical thinking to be able to understand, all right, this party or who this person is using such language to stir hate, or what is this discrimination or just retaliation towards other parties, and to be able to know that this is just tools within the political sphere that people use, especially during elections time, because we have seen this play out even throughout America's elections throughout, and then when they voted yesterday, it's just been so evident that these are the types of tools people use to fuel and to gain what is this dramatization and more what is this voters to their side. Yeah. So it's about having that clear understanding that is this something that is actually being used to fuel me, or is it being used to what is it actively fight against the system?
Exactly. I think just to add on the tools part that Elton mentioned, politicians are very good at weaponizing certain situations, and it's the same in this regard. Instead of addressing the situation and doing the necessary groundwork, such as perhaps let's prioritize people from our country and ensure that they get the jobs, or for example, they instead use that as a sort of tool. I will make sure that foreigners don't get jobs, and I will make sure that Namibians are prioritized because I push for nationalism and so forth. It's a thing of understanding when something is being used as a weapon and when there's a possibility for a progressive solution to be made.
We've almost come to the end of our time, but lastly, this is a statement that we use in this country: one Namibia, one nation. And like I said, elections come and go. Namibia is here to stay. How do we foster that spirit of unity after elections, despite despite the outcome, if it's not in my favor or it's in your favor, but how do we pick up from there and say, look, you did well, you tried your best, but hey, we still have to build this country. How are we going to do that?
I think it goes back again to the whole, we have a common goal. We are still one Namibia, one nation, as much as we have differing opinions. We have a common goal. We're dealing with high unemployment rate. We're dealing with a stagnant economic growth. We as Namibians have common issues that we all want to see be resolved at the end of the day. I think it's about getting an understanding of that. In the long run, elections is just putting someone there who we can trust to carry out these mandates.
Exactly. I think it's looking at somebody and being able to be like, all right, we have elected someone, but let's see how they play out and how they actually solve these issues that are still critically harming us, such as these environmental issues like drought and how we can get water to specific regions dramatically. So it's looking at how they can actually improve this economy and seeing a growth between us as we can actually try and get the youth jobs and also create more healthcare that is actually affordable and effective for people all around the country.
All right. Elton, Nicole, thank you so much for your time. It's been a great pleasure speaking to such fresh minds, unafraid of expressing your opinions. And that's what democracy is all about. And I think the people at home also appreciate this exchange of ideas and the youthful perspective, of course. Thank you so much. And like I said, you've shared your 2 cents plus more. How they decide to spend it is entirely up to them. But thank you so much. All right, now before we go, we always have an African proverb, and today's proverb is not from Equatorial Guinea, it's from somewhere else, and it goes as follows. Those who pray for rain should be ready to deal with the mud, meaning life comes with both benefits and challenges. You can't expect to have success, relationships, or leadership without facing difficulties. Many of us desire things on our terms, but life doesn't cater only to our wishes. One person's gain may be another's inconvenience. Instead of complaining, we should embrace the complete experience, even if the mud that comes with the rain. Until next time, remember the tagline, situation critical, minds philosophical. Peace and love.